there, and welcome to Labour Media. Few elements of language are as horribly mangled as those regarding politics. It seems that words in politics, be they the words of ideologies or those of the ideas within said ideologies, have a different meaning depending on whomever you ask. Socialism, communism, Marxism, etc. are all such terms, but so too are the terms that describe our opposition. Liberalism, the idea that stands against socialism, is itself distorted by the worldview it encourages. Liberalism itself has made it hard for its adherents and opponents to identify liberals. Some think liberalism is a left-wing ideology. Some think liberals are inherently progressive. Some think liberalism refers solely to the bourgeois reformism of the Liberal Democrats or the Democrats in the US. These viewpoints are all deceived. Today we will explore the philosophical and economic tenets of liberalism to decipher what liberalism is, the current mode of the base and superstructure which seeks to secure its position through its own teachings. The era of liberalism is the era that followed that of feudalism in both economy and philosophy. We could mark this era around the time of the French Revolution, but we cannot, like with any historical progression, mark one point wherein the whole world changed. Let us look first at what came before. Feudalism involved a system of serfs and lords. Engels summed up the differences between the proletariat and the oppressed classes under feudalism in The Principles of Communism. A serf possesses and uses an instrument of production, a piece of land, in exchange for which he gives up a part of his product or part of the services of his labour. The proletarian works for the instruments of production of another for the account of this other in exchange for a part of the product. The serf gives up, the proletarian receives. The serf has an assured existence, the proletarian has not. The serf is outside competition, the proletarian is in it. The serf liberates himself in one of three ways. Either he runs away to the city and there becomes a handicraftsman, or, instead of products and services, he gives money to his lord and thereby becomes a free tenant, or he overthrows his feudal lord and becomes himself a property owner. In short, by one route or another, he gets into the owning class and enters into competition. The proletarian liberates himself by abolishing competition, private property, and all class differences. The serf made goods chiefly for themselves and their lord, owning their own tools. The markets that existed under feudalism were an embryonic form of commodity production, with serf goods sometimes being sold on by lords or for a growing class of merchants. We see here goods that are made with exchange and use values, goods that are useful to someone but are produced to be exchanged. This turned this growing merchant class into a middle class that would grow to dominate and revolt against feudalism's reign, turning dictatorships of the landed aristocracy into dictatorships of this new middle class turned upper class, a dictatorship of the bourgeoisie. The maintenance of this new system and the perpetuation of this new system required a new superstructure and a new shaping of society that came in the form of liberalism. Before I explain what liberalism is, meaning the essential undercurrents that rest within each iteration of liberalism, we must understand that liberalism has passed through multiple precedents. It has remained the dominant ideology of the world, but it has not been unchanging. Originally, we had classical liberalism during capitalism's inception before moving on to the adoption of reformist elements in the early 20th century till the late 1940s, where social democracy took course. This was the status quo until neoliberalism became dominant in the 80s and to the present day. These variations will be explained later. First, we must explain the aforementioned undercurrents. Liberalism always has the base of capitalism. It always entails a system of commodity production, a proletariat and bourgeoisie, and a system of markets that trend towards monopoly and thus towards imperial expansion. There is no such thing as liberalism without capitalism. Liberalism could be described as the superstructure which rests upon the capitalist base, or it could be the name given to the base and superstructure combined to the current era as a whole. It depends on whether you believe capitalism can exist without liberalism. I prefer to think that the numerous unique modifications of the capitalist superstructure, conservatism, social democracy, fascism, etc., are outgrowths of liberalism proper. They all share this same economic base, but use the basic superstructure of liberalism to create a new, unique superstructure. This is also why all these different facets support a similar foreign policy. There is minimal foreign policy distinction between liberalism proper, conservatism, social democracy, fascism, etc. In fact, we could say that liberal foreign policy is fascist, and how liberalism, in our times, uses fascism to keep itself in power. Imperial expansion and repartitioning are essential under the monopoly stage of capitalism that liberalism currently inhabits. Hence, all these capitalist ideologies, formed as outgrowths of liberalism, require this imperialism to go ahead. Liberalism is inextricably linked to capitalism, and so capitalism creates its philosophical foundations. Liberalism is anti-dialectical in all its aspects because of its individual focus. Whereas Marxist dialectical materialism embraces the intersection of all things, how no material element exists in a vacuum, liberalism is entirely focused on individuals rather than groups or systems. Just as capitalism requires every worker to believe that these systems before them are just and they are in competition with their fellow worker, liberalism fosters this by its focus on the individual and the liberty on the individual. Liberalism stresses the importance of pulling yourself up by the bootstraps, bettering your own station rather than that of the system. We are told that anyone can make it if they just work hard enough. Liberalism does not perceive classes in conflicts, rather class is determined by your tax bracket rather than a material relation to production. Moreover, liberalism in all its forms believes in two important structures, a dictatorship of the bourgeois, which most often takes the form of a representative democracy, air quotes, and a social contract. The bourgeoisie, the owner class, has a monopoly over the liberal state, particularly with the power of monopolist profits gained during this imperialist epoch. The government, despite being bought and sold by financial oligarchy, stresses its appearance as of the people. Even under the destruction of the so-called democratic apparatus that occurs under fascism, the people are still gaslit into believing this is what they want. This supposedly democratic state that relies on principles of deference established by Burke in whatever form it establishes itself is also assumed to have a social contract with its citizens. First established by Thomas Hobbes in his book Leviathan and built upon by Jean-Jacques Rousseau, fucking French names, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, I don't know. Social contract theory alleges that we enter a willing partnership with the state, wherein we allow them some control over our rights in return for security. Once again, we have a very individualized concept that the state owes each individual security because of a willing contract. Of course, nobody ever gets a chance to sign this social contract, nor do we get a chance to revoke our signature. Moreover, the bourgeois state views not a sea of individuals in the masses, but a sea of replaceable cogs that are needed to work, propagate themselves, and then be discarded. It does not see individuals that it owes any sort of debt to. So let's recap the fundamentals of liberalism, what I refer to as liberalism proper. Liberalism is the combination of a capitalist base with a superstructure that seeks to divide the masses into individuals in order for prime and expedient exploitation to go ahead, painting the vision of society that any individual can succeed in if they participate, where in fact participation is to submit to the manacles of capital. Think of it as a reactionary soup which other ideologies with the same base are facets of. So what about those aforementioned ways liberalism has been moulded to suit the needs of capital? Well, from the origins of classical liberalism, we've seen numerous phases where the dominant liberal states have shifted their policy. Around the 1940s, pressure from the Soviet bloc created widespread class consciousness throughout the imperial core. Need for reconstruction after World War II, in addition to this, solidified a new need, leading to the Keynesian social democratic period, the post-war consensus. This saw the Attlee government in the UK with their nationalisation and welfare reforms, FDR's New Deal and subsequent Democrat reforms in the US, as well as similar reforms within the Western Bloc, such as in Scandinavia. Social democracy development requires its own video, not that one, but safe to say, such concessions get stripped away when the people aren't in power. Social democracy is still a dictatorship of the bourgeois, just as the following the neoliberal era of the 80s to now is it's still going, but you know what I mean. Neoliberalism, through austerity and privatisation, peels back what social democracy brought. It's laissez-faire capitalism backed by a state machinery more impressive and more expansionist than ever. A fully developed state apparatus backing up massive growth and centralisation. The destructive potential was made especially clear with the shock therapy former Soviet countries went through in the 90s. This shock doctrine led to millions of deaths, massive poverty and social regression as reactionary philosophy met reactionary economics. Neoliberalism seeks to separate individuals away from collective power, just as liberalism proper always has, only now it is through force, through red tape and welfare, and through a militarised police state. Liberalism is not a left-wing ideology. Rather, it is that which exists within everything that is not left-wing. If we are to take left-leaning to mean something that progresses history from one epoch to another, then liberalism was once left-wing, whether it is now the incumbent right-wing force that must be toppled by a left-wing force of socialism. Liberalism is the use of individualist division to dupe the worker into thinking they have a fair shake under capitalism. They need only participate in competition with their fellows and work hard to succeed and take the top spot. It creates, to paraphrase John Steinbeck, a nation where workers view themselves not as workers, but as temporarily embarrassed millionaires. Thank you for watching. I have enjoyed having a uvula. That was fun while it lasted. It's fucking it's gonna drop off. I don't know why that's so horrible. I don't know why that, but I guess like just above. Either way, the vocal cords aren't doing too well after that one. Yeah, sometimes there was like a weird rolling noise in the background. I don't know where that came from. I think the cats are playing. But yeah, this took longer than I expected. Hopefully, I got some ideas of what's happening next. What I'm doing next, I should say. I've got some interesting ideas. Still working on the documentary. Oh, it's going slow, but it'll take as long as it takes, really. Thingamabob's in the description. What's a thingamabob? It's a transcript. That's what's in the description. Do I forget to say that? I might have been forgetting to say that recently. I hope not. Yeah, that's in the description. What else? Probably just that, honestly. Maybe I have some quotes in here. I could put those. Yeah, those. Remind me. Okay. Is that everything? I reckon that's everything. Right. This has been Labour Media, and remember, Labour conquers all.